We've heard a lot about the so-called conservative war on women, but is there also an ongoing war against boys in the Western world? That's the claim by the best-selling author of Who Stole Feminism, Christina Hoff Sommers. Christina argues that boys are the ones languishing socially and academically, and that it comes with a staggering cost to us in economic costs. Her latest book is a revised edition of The War Against Boys. There you see its cover, How Misguided Policies Are Harming Our Young Men. She joins me from Washington, D.C. The book was originally published in 2000. It had a different subtitle at that time. The new edition has just been published. Why bring it back again, Christina?
Well, the problem didn't go away. It got worse. And in between 2000 and today, boys have become politically incorrect.
Politically incorrect how?
There's just increasing intolerance for little boys. From the moment they enter school, it's as if girls set the gold standard and boys fall short. Girls are able to, more than boys, to sit quietly and listen to the teacher. That is a struggle for many little boys. Not all, but I'm talking about the typical young male child entering school, and he's not altogether welcome. The typical play of little boys is rough and tumble play. Girls do it too. Boys do it a lot more. Increasingly, parents don't like it. Teachers don't like it. And that means that boys sort of exist in an atmosphere of disapproval.
Is this new?
What's new is that school has never been more important to a young person's prospects. And what we see now, and this is new, is that college is increasingly female-dominated. According to the Department of Education, schools are now giving about 60% of master's degrees to women, 58% of bachelor's degrees, and with no end in sight. If you look at the trajectory, boys are either staying the same or going down, and girls are onward and upward. I'm very excited at what's going on with girls, but we have to find ways to reach out to boys.
Is this whose fault? Who's to blame?
I think that a lot of forces came together that are just averse, creating an averse environment for little boys. Our schools have become more sedentary, more feeling-centered, competition-free, and when they go in that direction, they leave a lot of boys behind. Take something like recess. Now, as a former little girl, I like recess, I can tell you. I loved it and look forward to it. Boys absolutely need it. And as some psychologists have said, less research, more hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder. You're going to have to be medicating little boys if you don't let them have recess. We have not paid attention to the fact that boys are not reading on a par with girls. The average little girl is a year and a half ahead of the boy sitting next to her in reading and writing. We haven't looked at the college gap. There are colleges now where they have to practice affirmative action just to have to get 40% young men, let alone 50%. So it seems as though our schools are neglecting the academic needs of boys at a time where education past high school has never been more important.
You originally subtitled the book, How Misguided Feminism is Harming Our Young Men. It's now changed to Misguided Policies. Why the change?
Well, when I wrote that subtitle, my emphasis was on misguided. I've always been a feminist, and I think the women's movement is one of the great hallmarks of our democracy. So I didn't want this to be interpreted as an anti-feminist book. I was saying misguided. And what I should have said is a misguided women's lobby. There are lobbying groups who sort of see the world in terms of, they represent Venus against Mars, and Venus has to win, and, they see it as a zero-sum game. And that lobby, I just part company with them. I think we're all in this together. If our little boys are in trouble, we're all in trouble. These are the young men with whom our daughters and granddaughters will forge a future. So we have to attend to the needs of all of our children,
it's still
including
pretty
the male
much
ones.
Christina, Men still control the Fortune 500, the CEOs. It's still a man's world, isn't it? Really?
It may be a man's world. It's not a boy's world. And what we're seeing is because of the college gap favoring women, you're going to be, we will eventually eliminate the wage gap, and you will have far more women in positions of power. But I don't think that we want to get there through neglecting the needs of boys. I think we want to get there by being concerned for everyone and having an equal opportunity society. And little boys with their literacy needs and the dropout rates, the failure rates, the fail to care about school rates are so high, and it puts us at risk as a society. If you look at how young men and women behave in college, what do they major in? Despite several decades of feminism and women's liberation, you still find far more women in fields like English, education, psychology, art history, and you find boys drifting to fields like economics and engineering. So where are we going to get, if we're not educating boys and preparing them, I think it creates a risk in our workforce. It's a war against our technological future.
How would this be affected if Hillary Clinton is the next president?
Well, I think she is a feminist in the best sense of the word, and probably fair-minded towards boys and girls. A lot of the attitudes in feminism that I worry about are in the universities right now, a sort of gender activism, and as I said, that sees men and women as on opposing teams. I don't think Mrs. Clinton views the world that way.
All right. Do you see gender politics impacting the next election?
I think there will be a lot of discussion about, for example, the wage gap. Now, I have a slightly different view. Women do earn less than men, but most economists, including many feminist economists, if you look carefully, you see that it's largely explained by the fields that women enter, what they majored in college, as I mentioned before, how many years they stay in the workplace. Men work more hours per week. If you do the proper controls, the wage gap narrows to the point of vanishing. It's not entirely gone, and I'm still enough of a feminist to resent a few cents, but when people say that women are being cheated out of close to 25% of their salary, that's ridiculous. And what employer wouldn't fire all of his male employees, hire only women, and reap a huge competitive advantage? If it were true.
Do you see a wide discussion of this on the American scene or in the political campaign?
About boys?
Yeah.
Or about the wage gap?
Well, they'll talk about the wage gap, but I doubt that this will be a political issue, the war against boys.
It can't be, and I'll tell you why. When I became a feminist in the last millennium, there were serious problems and serious injustices. And in the 70s and the 80s, we needed all of these women's groups, working hard to advance the interests of women. But what happens when, feminism is a huge success story? Women are, entering professions in greater numbers and prevailing in many, many fields, in law and in journalism and certainly in veterinary medicine. It used to be all men, now it's largely women in our best schools of veterinary medicine. What do you do then if you're a women's organization? Well, they don't give up and shut the door. They keep fighting, and in some cases they're more bitter. In the meantime, there are no lobbying groups for little boys. There's no one advancing their interests, and they've been left on a back burner. Now, other countries, England, Australia, Canada, they are very worried about the fact that boys are not flourishing academically, and they have massive numbers of programs. But because of the divisive gender politics in the United States, we're unable to do anything, and it is this lobby. So I'm not talking about feminism, but I'm talking about a part of the women's lobby that's just, they see any effort to help boys as part of backlash. It's just an effort. Yeah.
Millennials are products of what you call the war against boys. And you've said many of them have accepted what you described as a grim feminist worldview. How does this impact the system?
Yes. That's in the colleges. and that's a small percentage of young women, not a majority, and some young men, they go to college, and there are these activist gender scholars. And I was among them. I taught philosophy for many years, and I taught feminist theory. But I always thought, thou shalt teach both sides of the argument. So I tried to be as sort of neutral as I could. But in many classrooms, you have activist professors, and they want to pass along these ideas to their students. In 21st century America, they are teaching young women, largely, that they live in a patriarchal, oppressive society, that masculinity is toxic, and on and on. All of this is based on what I take to be very exaggerated and often false statistics and twisted theories about men and women. And so a small percentage of women join them. They join this army of sort of embittered gender warriors. And I would not want that to happen to my granddaughter. And so I warn parents. I have a series called The Factual Feminist, and I try to give students tips on how to avoid the wacky gender politics on the campus.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The book, again, is The War Against Boys, How Misguided Policies Are Harming Our Young Men. It's out now, and it's available everywhere, and my thanks to its author, Christina Hoff Sommers.